I don't know where to stand.
CarsIreland.ie. Click, click, vroom, vroom.
Hello and welcome back to the Cars Ireland YouTube channel. My name is Anthony and this is the all-new Kia Niro Plug-In Hybrid. Looks good, doesn't it? I think it's a big improvement on the outgoing model. It's got a certain identity and presence that the previous one just didn't have. But please do let us know what you think of it in the comments. I am a big fan of these 18-inch 5-spoke alloys. This colour is great. I can't decide if it's grey, green, black, blue. It's probably grey. Shall we have a look around? It is powered by a 1.6 litre petrol engine that is mated to an electric motor, and you get a power output of about 180 brake horsepower, and the gearbox is a 6-speed dual clutch automatic. Your charging port is here on the front. Pop that in. And on board you have an 11.1 kilowatt hour battery with a quoted range of up to 60 kilometers on pure electric power alone, and a max charging rate of 3.3 kilowatts. So on a wall box you can charge it in about 3 hours. If you plug it into a more traditional 3-pin plug, you're probably talking 5, 6, 7 hours depending. Don't know why I plugged that in, it's not going anywhere. Our test car comes with an electric tailgate. And as is typical with most plug-in hybrids, you do lose out on a bit of boot space thanks to the hybrid setup. So the Niro Plug-In Hybrid has 358 litres of space. Full EV version has over 100 litres more. It is a smaller boot, but you can drop the seats easily with the flick of these switches on the back. And the parcel shelf is a very light piece of fabric that you fold away in a bag here when you want to put it away. And you have a small bit of storage under the floor for your cables, more than likely. Welcome to the back, and space back here is very impressive. I've loads of knee room, loads of headroom. That's my seating position and I'm 6 foot and I really wouldn't be too upset back here. I have heated seats too. These windows are tinted, center armrest, USB-C on either seat, and a 2-prong 220 volt charger here in the middle. Odd one, but there you go. And a little magazine holder here. And there is adjustment in these seats that do go far back or more upright. The only maybe complaint would be if you're in the middle and an adult, it's going to be tight, but that's fairly standard. And the hump here in the middle is kind of large. Front. So I'll start with price because that's always an interesting topic of discussion. As it stands, there are currently 2 models on offer, a K3 and a K4. The K3 costs €38,500, the K4 costs €41,500. The K3 is really well spec'd. It has the 10-inch infotainment screen, it has those 18-inch alloys, it has smart cruise control, it has highway driving assist where it keeps you in your lane on motorways, and it has blind spot and collision avoidance and all the good safety stuff. The K4 gets upgraded artificial leather seats that are heated and ventilated. So I think some of the leather is made from eucalyptus wood, if I read that right. Eco-conscious materials, very important. You have a 10-inch display for the driver, which is really cool, and there's lots of visual changes and options on it as well, which looks really well. You have a head-up display too. Oh, and that power tailgate we were showing you earlier. Moral of the story is K4 is really nice, but K3 is perfectly sufficient if you want to save a bit of cash. The 10-inch infotainment screen works really well. It's nice, slick. You can put Android Auto and Apple CarPlay on it. You have sat-nav, you have your plug-in hybrid information, you can control your climate. And what I do like is the ventilated seats or heated seats can be matched to what you choose on the air conditioning. So if you get in and it's cold and you just turn it up hot, the heated seats will come on, or if it's hot and you want it cold, you turn it to cold, the ventilated seats come on automatically rather than having to press the buttons down here. On those buttons down here, it is in piano black. You do touch it a lot, so if you're a bit OCD, that is frustrating because you get fingerprints everywhere. Your drive selector is a rotary dial down here. You have 2 cup holders, a very small bit of storage here under the armrest, single spoke steering wheel, which I don't really like the look of. Looks a bit chunky here in the middle for me. And I don't really like this plasticky panel here. Looks a bit cheaper than maybe the rest of it. The cup holders have an interesting action on them. So a big button that says push and they pop out. Boom. So under the infotainment screen there is a control panel here for your climate control, and then it has quick override buttons to bring you directly to certain parts of the infotainment screen. So if you click it, You can go to your map, your nav, your media, your radio, your setup quickly rather than trying to find it in the screen. But then you have to change back to the air conditioning to control that then with a different button. So a bit fiddly. You do have dials for the temperatures on either side, but that's it. Under that panel you have a 12-volt charger, a USB, a USB-C and a wireless charging pad too. I do like the look of it. I do think it could do with a lift of colour, that's the only thing. It is maybe a slight bit dull in here, but other than that, great tech, great build quality, looks well, really nice. So what's it like to drive? Well, without beating around the bush, this car is excellent and anyone who buys one I think would be very, very happy. End. I suppose some housekeeping, because most importantly people buy a plug-in hybrid for the fuel economy, and that figure is really good on this so far, and the computer is telling me it has averaged 3.5 litres per 100 kilometres over those 550 kilometres. Not quite the 0.9 that is quoted on the Kia stuff, but still, if you were getting that over the lifetime of the car, you'd be saving quite a bit of cash. And as for EV range, I think the quoted 60 is unrealistic in most situations. Unless you're driving slow, driving through town all the time, you might get 60 in summer. I think 50s is probably a bit more realistic long term, and still a solid and pretty typical outcome for most plug-in hybrids. And I'm like a broken record on this one, but if you keep a plug-in hybrid plugged in and charged, you'll get really good fuel economy. I say that every time, it's getting so boring. If we take my few days with the car, it's done 225 kilometers and averaged 3.4 litres per 100 kilometers. So, you know, I'm winning most of that. Now you do get a few options on how you can control the different drivetrains and engines and stuff with the use of this little EV button here on the dash. So it kind of naturally goes into EV mode and tries to use the electric motor and battery as much as possible. If you click it again, it's set to auto. So I think the car then decides what it needs at any given situation and what might be best for it. So now we are cruising at 74 kilometers an hour and we're not using any petrol engine whatsoever. I put the foot down, petrol engine kicks in for, I suppose, an appropriate response for pushing the pedal. Then the last option is HEV, so then the car operates more like a self-charging hybrid electric vehicle, so the engine and electric motor are both working together. And now as we speak, the engine is ticking over at 1500 revs and the electric motor is working at the same time. If you're doing longer distances, that can be your best option just because it'll preserve the battery a bit more. If you know you're going 100 kilometers, you don't really want to waste 50 kilometers of EV range and then have the remainder where you're basically carrying a dead battery effectively. So to get the best use out of it, you really want to pop it into HEV mode before you do a longer journey. I think the sat-nav has a setting where it'll decide where best to use the different modes, but the problem with that is if you're doing something on a regular basis, you're not going to type it into the sat-nav, so you do need a bit of your own intervention from time to time to get the best from it. The transition from electric to petrol power isn't too bad, it's pretty quick most of the time. You do hear the engine when it kicks in. It's not that loud and it's well isolated from the driver, but it isn't the most pleasant sounding thing in the world. Now, along with the ability to control how the engines work, you can pick drive modes too. So it's fairly straightforward. It's set up as default in eco mode and you have a sport mode too. So you have a big button here in the steering wheel, press it once, you go into sport mode, press it again, you're back into eco. In sport mode, the throttle does just kick in a bit quicker, it's a bit more responsive, but I think for the most part you'll be happy enough with the power, 180 brake horsepower, 0 to 100 in under 10 seconds. It's perfectly fine most of the time. It suits the car perfectly well. We're going over a few ramps now and I have noticed that the suspension is very impressive. It's very comfortable most of the time. It's a nice comfortable ride. I actually came directly from the Kia Sportage plug-in hybrid and this is more comfortable. You immediately felt this was more comfortable when you sat in. Now, as this is a partly electric powered car, you have regen braking. So when you lift your foot off the accelerator pedal, it feels like the brakes are being applied and the car slows down. And you can control that via these flappy paddles behind the steering wheel. So if you press minus, 1, 2, 3, there's 3 levels of regen braking, 3 being the highest. And as you lift off, the brakes applied. So depending on what you might prefer, you might use that. It doesn't seem to, I couldn't seem to find a setting where it's always set on. You do have to trigger it via these dials each time. But it's a nice one to have and a good one if you're really trying to preserve that battery. If you actually put it in sport mode, then it becomes a gear change, flappy paddle gear change. It's not the most sporty drive in the world, but it's perfectly acceptable. The steering is nicely weighted, it's sharp and precise, and I'd have actually no issues with it at all. It's perfectly acceptable for this car. And it deals with body roll really well, unless you are pushing it at its limits, which once again I don't think is going to be a big issue in a plug-in hybrid Niro. Okay, I think we'll end it there. That's our review of the Kia Niro Hybrid. If you'd like to search Cars Ireland for your Niro, please do click on the link above and have a look around. We have over 40,000 cars for sale at the minute. And we will see you again next time. All the best. Bye bye.